At 1417, on April 24th, 1945, Staff Sergeant Roy Benavidez crouched in elephant grass 60 miles north of Saigon, watching 38 North Vietnamese soldiers force a blindfolded American pilot to his knees. And in the next 5 minutes, Benavidez would kill every single one of them, using wounds that should have killed him 3 times over. But first he had to survive what happened when the executioner raised his pistol and the pilot stopped breathing, because that's when Benavidez realized he was already too late to save the man, which meant he had exactly one choice left: make those 38 men pay for what they'd done, or die trying. The jungle was silent, the kind of silence that comes before violence, before blood, the kind that makes your ears ring because you're listening so hard for the sound that will tell you when to move, when to shoot, when to die. Benavidez was 28 years old, had been in Vietnam for 11 months, had seen men die in ways that would give him nightmares for the next 50 years. But he'd never seen this. Never watched enemy soldiers prepare to execute a downed American pilot while he hid 200 meters away, unable to stop it, unable to do anything except watch through his rifle scope as the executioner put the barrel of a Tokarev pistol against the pilot's temple. The pilot's name was Captain James Harlow, F-4 Phantom pilot, 32 years old, married, 2 kids back in California. He'd been shot down 3 hours earlier during a bombing run over a suspected Viet Cong supply route. His wingman had reported seeing one parachute, had called in coordinates, had requested immediate search and rescue, but the rescue helicopters were 40 minutes out. Too far, too late. The North Vietnamese had found Harlow first, had stripped him of his survival vest, his radio, his pistol, had tied his hands behind his back, and force-marched him 2 clicks through the jungle to this clearing, this killing ground, where 38 soldiers waited to make an example of the American who'd been dropping bombs on their supply convoys. Benavidez had been inserted 90 minutes earlier with a 4-man reconnaissance team. Their mission was simple on paper: locate the downed pilot, establish a perimeter, hold until the rescue birds arrived. But nothing in Vietnam was simple. The recon team had found Harlow's parachute, tangled in the canopy, 3 clicks from the crash site, had followed the drag marks and boot prints through the jungle, had heard voices, Vietnamese voices, too many voices, had gone to ground and crawled the last 500 meters on their bellies until they could see the clearing, see the pilot, see the 38 men who surrounded him. And then Benavidez's team leader, Sergeant First Class Martinez, had whispered the words that every Special Forces soldier dreads: "We can't take them. Too many. We extract and call in an airstrike," which meant abandon the pilot, leave him to die, save yourselves. Benavidez had looked at Martinez, had looked at the pilot kneeling in the clearing with a gun to his head, had done the math. 4 Americans with M16 rifles and 60 rounds each against 38 North Vietnamese with AK-47 seconds and a machine gun position. The mathematics were brutal, suicidal, impossible. Martinez was right. They should extract, call in fast movers, flatten the clearing with napalm. At least the pilot would die quickly. At least they wouldn't have to watch. But Benavidez kept thinking about Harlow's 2 kids back in California, kept thinking about the telegram that would arrive at their house, kept thinking that someone had to try, someone had to do the impossible thing. Because if it was Benavidez in that clearing, he'd want someone to try. The executioner pulled the trigger. The sound echoed through the jungle. Harlow's body fell forward into the dirt. The North Vietnamese soldiers cheered, raised their rifles over their heads, celebrated the death of the American pilot, and something inside Roy Benavidez broke. Not his courage, not his training, something deeper, something that made him stand up when every instinct screamed to stay down, made him check his rifle when logic said run, made him start walking toward 38 enemy soldiers when survival meant walking the other way. Martinez grabbed his arm. whispered, "Don't. You'll die. We all die." Benavidez pulled his arm free, said 4 words that would define the rest of his life. "Then I die trying," and started running. The elephant grass was 6 feet tall, thick enough to hide a man if he stayed low. Benavidez moved through it like water, using the terrain, using the noise of the Vietnamese celebration to cover the sound of his movement. He'd grown up hunting in South Texas, stalking deer through mesquite and cactus, moving silent, patient, deadly. Vietnam's jungle wasn't so different, just wetter, hotter, filled with men instead of animals. But the principles remained. Stay low, move slow. Don't break the grass pattern. Don't silhouette yourself against the sky. Be the predator, not the prey. He reached the clearing's edge, 80 meters from the nearest North Vietnamese soldier. The enemy had formed a loose perimeter around Harlow's body. Some were smoking cigarettes. Others were going through the pilot's pockets looking for souvenirs, dog tags, photographs, proof they'd killed an American. Their weapons were slung. Their guard was down. They thought they were safe, thought the jungle was theirs, thought no American would be crazy enough to attack 38 men alone. They were wrong about the last part, very wrong. And in approximately 90 seconds, they would learn exactly how wrong. Benavidez carried an M16A1 rifle with 4 20-round magazines taped together in pairs for faster reloading. He carried 6 fragmentation grenades on his web gear. He carried a survival knife with a 7-inch blade. He carried 12 years of Special Forces training, 6 months of jungle warfare school, and a rage so pure it made his hands stop shaking, made his breathing steady, made the world slow down into that crystal clarity that comes right before you do something that will either save lives or end yours. He pulled the pin on his first grenade, counted to 2, threw it into the middle of the enemy formation, dove flat into the grass. The explosion killed 4 men outright, wounded 6 more, shrapnel tearing through flesh and bone. The North Vietnamese scattered, shouting, trying to find cover, trying to locate the threat. Benavidez was already moving. He'd thrown the grenade from one position, was firing from another. His M16 barked in 3-round bursts. Controlled fire, aimed fire, center mass shots that dropped men where they stood. 1 down, 2 down, 3 down. He emptied his first magazine in 8 seconds, dropped it, flipped to the taped magazine, kept firing. 4 down, 5 down, 6 down. The enemy finally located him. AK-47 fire ripped through the elephant grass. Bullets snapped past his head. Benavidez rolled left, came up firing, caught 2 soldiers trying to flank him, put rounds through both of them. 7 down, 8 down. He threw his second grenade. The explosion bought him 3 seconds. He used them to sprint 20 meters to new cover. The North Vietnamese were firing at where he'd been, not where he was. Basic infantry tactics. Always move after you shoot. Never stay in the same position. The enemy learns, adapts, but if you're faster than their learning curve, you stay alive. A machine gun opened up from the far side of the clearing. The RPD light machine gun, firing 650 rounds per minute. 7.62 millimeters rounds that cut the elephant grass like a scythe. Benavidez went flat, hugged the earth, felt bullets pass inches over his back. The machine gunner was good, disciplined, firing in short bursts, conserving ammunition, walking his fire across Benavidez's last known position. But Benavidez had already low-crawled 15 meters perpendicular to the gun's arc. He came up on one knee, acquired the target, saw the gunner silhouetted against the tree line, squeezed the trigger. 3 rounds. The machine gun went silent. 9 down, 29 remaining. The mathematics were shifting. 38 to 1 had become 29 to 1. Still impossible, but less impossible. Benavidez had surprise, had aggression, had killed 9 men in less than 2 minutes. But he also had a problem. He was down to 1 magazine, 20 rounds. 29 enemies meant he needed every bullet to count, needed to make shots that would have been difficult on a rifle range. Never mind in jungle combat against men who were now actively trying to kill him. He needed more ammunition, which meant he needed to reach the dead, take their weapons, their grenades, their ammunition belts, which meant exposing himself to enemy fire, which meant dying. Unless he was faster than their bullets, smarter than their tactics, willing to do things that no sane man would attempt. Benavidez checked his remaining grenades. 4 left. Made a decision that would either win this fight or end it. Pulled the pins on 2 grenades simultaneously, threw them in opposite directions into the enemy formation, dove behind a fallen log as both grenades detonated within a second of each other. Screams, confusion, smoke. He sprinted across open ground toward the nearest dead North Vietnamese soldier, grabbed the man's AK-47, grabbed 2 spare magazines from the corpse's chest rig. Rounds kicked up dirt around his boots. He dove, rolled, came up firing the AK. The weapon felt different than his M16, heavier, the recoil sharper, but it fired. It killed. 10 down, 11 down, 12 down. The North Vietnamese were adapting now. Their initial shock was wearing off. Their training was taking over. They were forming fire teams, coordinating fields of fire. One group would shoot while another moved. Textbook small unit tactics. They had numbers, they had discipline, they should have won. But they were fighting a man who had stopped caring whether he lived or died, which made him the most dangerous kind of soldier. The kind who fights with nothing to lose. The kind who doesn't retreat, doesn't surrender, doesn't stop until everyone is dead, or he is. Benavidez was that kind of soldier, and the North Vietnamese were learning it the hard way. A 3-man fire team tried to flank him from the right. Benavidez saw them moving through the grass, tracked their movement by watching the grass tips shift. He let them get close, 30 meters, 20 meters, 10 meters. They thought they were hunting him. They were wrong. At 8 meters, he popped up and fired the AK on full automatic, swept the muzzle across all 3 targets. The 7.62 millimeters rounds cut them down at point-blank range. 13 down, 14 down, 15 down. He was covered in blood. Now, some his, some theirs. He couldn't tell which. Didn't matter. Pain was information. Death was final. Everything in between was just noise. Another fire team tried the same flanking maneuver from the left. Benavidez threw a grenade. Didn't wait to see the results. Just listened for the explosion. Heard the screams. Knew he'd hit them. 16 down. Maybe 17. He'd lost count. Didn't matter. The only number that mattered was 0. 0 enemies remaining. 0 rounds left meant grab more. 0 grenades meant use the knife. 0 knife meant use rocks, teeth, hands, whatever it took to keep fighting until they were all dead, or he was. The North Vietnamese commander, a captain based on his insignia, was shouting orders, trying to organize a coordinated assault. He'd finally figured out there was only one American, had done the math, realized his 20 remaining men should overwhelm one soldier through sheer numbers if they attacked simultaneously from multiple directions. The captain was right. The tactic would work against a normal soldier. But Benavidez saw the enemy forming up, saw the attack coming, and instead of retreating, he attacked first, charged straight at the largest concentration of enemy soldiers, firing the AK from the hip, screaming. The North Vietnamese weren't ready for it, didn't expect the hunted to become the hunter, hesitated for one critical second, and in that second, Benavidez was among them. Close quarters combat, the kind where rifles are too long, where you shoot point blank or use the weapon as a club, where knives are faster than bullets, where training matters less than aggression and will to survive. Benavidez had all 3. He shot the first soldier in the face from 2 feet away, used the dead man's body as a shield against the second soldier's burst, shoved the corpse forward into the shooter, drove his knife into the third soldier's throat, 18 down, 19 down, 20 down. The formation broke. Men ran, some toward him, some away. Panic and training fighting for control. Benavidez dropped the empty AK, grabbed an M16 from a dead soldier. American weapon, probably taken from an earlier ambush. It had 2 magazines taped together, 40 rounds. He fired in controlled bursts, 3 rounds per target. Chest shots. The range was 10 meters or less. Impossible to miss. 21 down, 22 down, 23 down. A bullet hit him in the left shoulder, spun him around. He went down on one knee, kept firing one-handed. 24 down. Another round hit his right thigh. He fell, rolled, came up, firing. 25 down. Pain was just information. Information could be ignored. Death was the only thing that mattered. And death was for the enemy, not for him. Not today, not until every single one of them paid for Harlow. The North Vietnamese captain finally understood he was fighting a demon, not a man. Tried to withdraw his remaining soldiers, started shouting orders to fall back. Benavidez shot him first. The captain went down, clutching his stomach. The withdrawal order died with him. The remaining soldiers, maybe 10, maybe 12, Benavidez had lost count, were leaderless, panicking. Some were running into the jungle. Others were trying to surrender. Benavidez had seen what they did to Harlow, had watched them execute an unarmed pilot. Surrender was not an option. He kept firing. A soldier dropped his weapon, raised his hands, started saying something in Vietnamese. Benavidez shot him. The man fell. Benavidez felt nothing. Not guilt, not satisfaction. Just the mechanical process of pulling the trigger, watching the target fall, acquiring the next target, pulling the trigger again. 26 down, 27 down, 28 down. His rifle clicked empty. He dropped it, pulled his knife. A North Vietnamese soldier charged him with a bayonet. Benavidez sidestepped, too slow. The bayonet cut across his ribs. He felt it tear through skin and muscle. Ignored it. Drove his knife up under the soldier's chin. The blade went through soft tissue into the brain. 29 down. 8 soldiers remained. They were running now. Full retreat into the jungle. Benavidez grabbed a dropped AK-47. Checked the magazine. Half full. Maybe 15 rounds. He stood. Tried to run after them. His right leg buckled. The bullet wound in his thigh had done more damage than he realized. He couldn't run. Could barely walk. But he could shoot. He braced against a tree. Aimed. Fired single shots at the fleeing soldiers. Leading the targets. Accounting for wind and distance. 30 down. 31 down. They were at 80 meters now. Maximum effective range for the AK. He fired anyway. 32 down. The remaining 6 disappeared into the jungle. Benavidez tried to follow. Made it 3 steps before his leg gave out completely. He fell. Tried to get up. Couldn't. His body had finally reached its limit. Blood loss, shock, wounds that should have killed him were catching up. He crawled toward Harlow's body. Had to check. Had to be sure. Dragged himself across 30 meters of blood-soaked dirt. Reached the pilot. Rolled him over. Harlow was dead. The bullet had entered his right temple and exited the left. Instant death. At least it had been quick. At least he hadn't suffered. Benavidez had killed 32 North Vietnamese soldiers to avenge a man who was already dead when the shooting started. Mathematics that made no sense. Revenge that changed nothing. Harlow's kids were still orphans. His wife, still a widow. But 32 enemy soldiers were dead. And that had to mean something. Had to count for something. Or else, what was the point of any of it? Martinez and the rest of the recon team materialized from the jungle. They'd watched the entire fight, had provided covering fire when they could. Martinez looked at Benavidez, looked at the bodies scattered across the clearing, said, "Jesus Christ, Roy, what did you do?" Benavidez said, "Counted wrong. 6 got away." Martinez said, "You killed 32 men in 5 minutes." Benavidez said, "Should have been 38. Martinez said, "You're bleeding out. We need to get you to a hospital," Benavidez said. "After we get Harlow," Martinez said, "he's dead. You're dying." "We're leaving now," Benavidez said. "We don't leave our dead." Martinez looked at him for a long moment, then nodded, said, "Someone help me carry the pilot. Someone else help Roy. We're extracting now." The helicopter ride to the field hospital took 20 minutes. Benavidez lost consciousness twice, woke up both times because Martinez slapped him and told him not to die. The medics at the hospital said he'd lost over 2 pints of blood, had 7 separate wounds, 3 bullets, 4 shrapnel impacts, should have been dead, should have gone into shock, should have been incapacitated. Instead, he'd killed 32 men. Martinez told the story to anyone who would listen. The hospital commander forwarded a report to MACV headquarters. By the time Benavidez woke up 14 hours later, the paperwork for a Medal of Honor recommendation was already in progress. But that's not how the story ended, because the Medal of Honor board reviewed the case and said there were no witnesses to verify the kill count. Said Martinez's team had been too far away to confirm individual kills. Said the evidence was insufficient. Said the recommendation was denied. Benavidez received a Silver Star instead, a significant honor, but not the medal his actions deserved. And for 15 years, that's where the story stayed, buried in classified files, known only to the men who'd been there. Then in 1980, a journalist named Brian O'Connor was researching Special Forces actions in Vietnam, found Benavidez's name in a declassified report, tracked him down in Texas, interviewed him, wrote an article for a military history journal. The article caught the attention of Congressman Henry B. Gonzalez, who reopened the Medal of Honor case. Gonzalez collected sworn statements from Martinez and the other recon team members, collected after-action reports, collected enemy body counts from the site, collected everything the Medal of Honor board had said was missing, submitted a new recommendation in 1981. President Ronald Reagan awarded Roy Benavidez the Medal of Honor on February 24, 1981. 36 years after the action, 15 years after the war ended, Benavidez was 46 years old. Retired from the Army, working as a counselor for at-risk youth in San Antonio. Reagan read the citation aloud. 7 wounds, 32 enemy killed, conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. When Reagan placed the medal around Benavidez's neck, the president whispered, "I'm sorry it took so long." Benavidez whispered back, "Better late than never, sir." Benavidez spent the next 17 years speaking at schools, veterans events, military bases, telling his story, telling Harlow's story, telling the story of every man who'd fought in Vietnam and never received recognition. He traveled over 100,000 miles, spoke to over 200,000 people, never charged a speaking fee, said his payment was making sure people remembered what soldiers do, what they sacrifice, what they endure. In 1991, the Department of Defense filmed him describing the action at a symposium. The recording became mandatory viewing for all Special Forces candidates. His words, his voice, describing what it felt like to charge 38 men, knowing you're going to die, but charging anyway because someone has to try. Roy Benavidez died on November 29, 1998. He was 63 years old. Complications from diabetes and heart disease, wounds and stress from Vietnam catching up decades later. He was buried at Fort Sam Houston National Cemetery with full military honors. Over 3,000 people attended, veterans from Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, soldiers who'd heard him speak, read his story, learned what it meant to fight beyond your limits, beyond your wounds, beyond reason. His funeral was the kind saved for generals and national heroes, because that's what he was, a hero who'd been forgotten for 15 years, then remembered forever. The clearing north of Saigon is empty now. The jungle has reclaimed it. Trees grow where men died. Vines cover the ground where blood soaked into the earth. But the Vietnamese still tell stories about that place, about the American soldier who fought like a demon, who killed 32 men to avenge one, who should have died but lived, who turned mathematics upside down and made the impossible look easy. Local villagers won't go there after dark. Say the spirits are angry. Say the ground is cursed. Say you can still hear gunfire on April nights when the wind is right. And maybe they're right. Maybe some violence leaves scars that never heal. Maybe some fights echo across decades. Or maybe it's just jungle sounds and human imagination. Either way, the story survived, the legend grew, and Roy Benavidez's name became synonymous with courage that refuses to calculate the odds. If you want more stories like this, hit the like button. Subscribe for the next forgotten chapter of history.